I hope to right a wrong. The extraordinary Symphony Number 6 by Dmitri Shostakovich is hardly ever played in concert programs, in spite of the fact that it is both a stirring musical testament and a vivid historical document. We are going to play it, and I hope that these few prefatory words can give you an insight that may permit you to experience this strangely heterogeneous work as a single entity, a flashpoint in musical history. Perhaps we can even find out why it's so rarely played. The symphony is on the short side, having only 3 movements, but what strange movements they are. There is first a long, slow meditation, a largo fantasy, which takes up at least 2/3 of the whole symphony. It's not even one of those multiple opening movements, as in so many of Mahler's symphonies, for example, that serve as both a solemn introduction and a sonata form allegro, complete with exposition, development, reprise, and all the classical trimmings. Not at all. It's a real, honest-to-God, slow movement, just like the funeral march of Beethoven's Eroica, or the second movement of a Brahms symphony, or so many other slow second movements of classical symphonies. But the twist is that this is not the second movement, it's the first and opening one, and it blooms as an entire symphonic poem on its own. It's one of Shostakovich's most intimate, private statements, like a personal prayer, almost a confessional experience. This hypnotizing meditation is then followed by 2 short, sharp, funny, even ridiculous little movements, scherzo and rondo, bing, bang, and the symphony's over, period. Now, what kind of symphony is this? No wonder nobody plays it. Conductors are afraid that nobody will applaud, because there's no sense of grand symphonic fulfillment, and that they will be further unrewarded by nasty critics who will say, why bother? It's just one of Dmitri's many mistakes. Let it rest in peace. In fact, the reaction to the symphony's premiere in Leningrad back in 1939 was something less than jubilant. Nobody seemed to be able to understand this deformed child. One critic even called it a torso without a head, and you can see why. On the surface, it is apparently no symphony at all, since it lacks a conventional first movement, that is a head, and consists only of a big trunk, that great largo, and then 2, shall we say, little arms, one of which is banging a tambourine in a maniacal Spanish fandango, and the other of which is pumping a circus band leader's baton, and end of symphony. What is going on? After all, Shostakovich was neither an amateur nor an idiot. Far from it, he was a world-class genius who had just written a famous and beloved 5th Symphony and was about to write his even more famous 7th, the so-called Leningrad Symphony, which was the talk of the entire world during the last war, except, of course, Hitler's world. So how to account for this anomaly, number 6 in B minor? There's the first clue, number 6 in B minor. There is another Symphony Number 6, also in B minor, by Tchaikovsky, a composer Shostakovich adored. Pyotr Ilyich Tchaikovsky, whose last will and testament was the all-time masterpiece known as the Pathétique. That symphony, which is also a historical document as well as a musical one, but that's for another program. That Pathétique is not only in B minor and is numbered 6, but is also the first symphony in the history of music to end with a long, slow movement. Think of it, that heartbreaking farewell to music and life, Adagio lamentoso. Is it only a coincidence, I ask, that the Shostakovich Sixth appears to be the first symphony in the history of music to begin with a long, slow movement, and in the same key at that? No, in the world of the spirit, there are no accidents. Shostakovich took up his private confession exactly where Tchaikovsky had left off his. Naturally, there are other influences to be felt in this great Largo, as we expect from so diverse and wide-ranging a composer as Shostakovich. But it is a bit surprising amidst all this romanticism to come upon pure Bach as one of the principal themes. And of course, there's always the great source, Gustav Mahler. All of which somehow combines naturally with the dark Russian passions of Tchaikovsky. But why all this dark passion here to begin this particular Symphony Number 6? Think of the year in which it was written, 1939. Think of the tensions of that moment in European history. Hitler was threatening the continent in all directions. Everyone was in the appeasing business, trying to avert war, and Germany had concluded a non-aggression pact with Russia. Then, on the 1st of September, Hitler walked into Poland and England declared war on Germany. Russia, however, sat back watching. After all, Stalin had his half of Poland, Hitler only the western half. And so Europe went to war, but not the Soviet Union. Non-aggression was the watchword. This was the atmosphere in which Shostakovich's Sixth had its premiere in Leningrad. Now just think of Shostakovich's position in his highly political country, where a mistake could be fatal, especially for artists, of whom Russia was so vainglorious, and who were so essential to Russia's image abroad. Poor Shostakovich had already been in grave trouble with Stalin and company. Only 3 years before, he had been rudely spanked in the official press for his opera Lady Macbeth of Mzensk, which was condemned for melodic deficiency and decadent modernism, and was speedily withdrawn from the world of performance. This action was spearheaded by Joseph Stalin, we are told, but was unanimously and gleefully backed by all Shostakovich's colleagues and critics. In fact, his disgrace was so thorough and so widely publicized that his new Fourth Symphony was never given its first performance at all, and he was put in the unutterably shameful position of having personally to request the Leningrad Philharmonic not to program it. That was in 1936. By the end of 1937, Shostakovich had performed the amazing feat of making an official and public apology via his Fifth Symphony, which he subtitled, get this, A Soviet Artist's Practical Response to Just Criticism. This was amazing on two counts, incompatible ones it would seem, namely that he was instantly restored to grace, and second, that the Fifth Symphony turned out to be a masterpiece. What luck. From then on, he was winning every prize in sight, including the Order of the Red Banner. Which brings us smoothly and happily to 1939. Hitler and Stalin dividing Poland, non-aggression, everybody happy. What could the new Symphony Number 6 possibly be? Exactly what it was and is: a long, very private confession that Tchaikovskyan Lamentoso continued in the most personal, almost secret way, abruptly followed by two comedy acts displaying the optimism and yuppiness of the good life in Soviet Russia. Hooray, aren't we all having fun? It's a ball. It's all carnivals and fandangos and patriotic pleasures. In other words, pure hypocrisy. But hypocrisy preceded by that so-called introductory movement, which is the real heart of the matter. And that's the only way Shostakovich could have gotten away with making a secret confession in public, to disguise it as an introduction, which of course it isn't, to be instantly followed by frolic, feasting, and fun. Well, you may ask, and rightly so, why then play this piece if it's not only deformed but hypocritical to boot? Well, I may rightly answer, because it is a beautiful and a true document of hypocrisy, accurately reflecting the realities of Russian society in 1939. It takes a genius to portray untruth as well as truth, just as this genius could apologize to his government 2 years earlier and make that apology an immortal statement. And it would take just such a genius to create 3 years later his next symphony, that staggering Sistine Chapel of a symphony known as the Leningrad, which again reflected the very different Russia of 1942 after Hitler had made his fatal error, like Napoleon, and attacked the Russian bear. The bloody and icy siege of Leningrad that followed produced that Michelangelesque masterpiece, the 7th Symphony of Shostakovich, which will be another big program. But meanwhile, here is Dimitri's Largo, the Shostakovich private diary.